So the first thing we're going to do to make our denim Sashiko tote bag is to make the two sides of the denim bag. This is the first side complete. It's made of a variety of patches of denim placed out, then patches of cotton, and then all stitched together. So the very first thing we need to do is to create our base layer of denim. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to show you how to make your patchwork denim side. This is one side I prepared earlier. It's layers of denim and then colours of patchwork fabric on the top. I've made it to fit my paper template, which is the size of the side of the bag. So I've got a variety of denim here. I'm going to layer them up and show you just how to make a bit of a mismatch. There is no right or wrong. I've got a variety of sizes here from various bits of denim projects from previous times. I'm not going for any particular standard shape or size, although I am going to follow the grain of the denim. Bear in mind as you layer that this bottom part is going to be the base of your bag, so you won't see it. I am looking for some natural shapes in jeans. I quite like that leg shape there, so I think I will move it round. It really doesn't matter. You can play with this for as long as you like. So I'm looking at colour and texture as I build my shapes. I think I'm going to go for a darker bit here and a paler bit there. Cut this straight here. So you can see it's beginning to come together. What that will look like. Where do I want to go? Paler. What I do want to avoid, let me show you this, is really sort of baggy knees that are sort of gone a bit. I want to keep to flat bits of denim. So I'm comparing the tonal values of both sides. My first side is much more varied than my second side. So I've been through my stash. I'm just going to move my first side to the side. And let's see if we can break this up a little bit, add a bit more texture or colour. You can see how that goes horizontally or vertically. The grain can make a difference as well. I think I'm going to move that down, this one up. It doesn't matter if you overlap your denim, It doesn't matter if my denim overlaps my paper template because I can trim that later. What does matter is that I do cover all the edges, not if I overlap. So I was going to more decisions, what to put where. Bring that down a bit. Of course, once I put my patches on as well, that will change the way it looks. I do need to make sure the denim does overlap sufficiently that when I stitch it, it all holes in place. Like that. No, I don't like that. Like that. I think that will be okay once I add in some splashes of colour. Let's try some splashes of colour and see. Remember, you can play around with this to your heart's content. Spend as long as you like mixing and matching. Once you add your blocks of patchwork fabric and then your stitching, it's all going to change how it looks as well. So now it's time to have some fun playing with some pieces of cotton fabric, placing them, seeing what you like the look of. As you can see, I'm just randomly placing bits of fabric. Remember, this section here is going to be underneath the base of your bag. Quite like having a piece near the top. We're going to be folding in a fraction from the top of your paper template here, so you're going to lose a little bit of seam allowance, so I'll move that down a little bit. So, do I want a splash of something here? I think I might go for something little. There we go. And then again, you're going to lose some of the edge here as well in your seam allowance. Yes, I'm satisfied with that. I'm going to go with that, so I'm going to pin it in place and then I'll be ready to show you how to stitch. Once you have it all pinned, cut away any excess fabric. So for me, I've got this bit here. I don't need that. I probably don't need that bit there. And I'm just going to check underneath if I've got any large areas of overlap. So I've got a bit here. No. Oh yes, there's quite a bit here. Maybe there. Yep. That'll just make your stitching that little bit easier. So now your fabric is trimmed, it's pinned, you're ready to sew. Let me show you how to do a simple running stitch. And then, so most of the bag is straight stitch, but then I'll show you how to do a circular running stitch as well for your patches. So I tend to go for a circular pattern on these rectangles and then straight stitches on the denim pieces. So I'm going to follow the grain, I'm going to go vertical there, horizontal there, probably horizontal there, and I'll play these two pieces by eye when I get to them. I tend to start with a piece that's going to hold everything together. So perhaps this piece, because that overlaps 3, or here that overlaps 2. But let me show you running stitch first, so let's do a simple running stitch along here. So I like to use what I've got. I have a lot of embroidery silks. So here's my embroidery silk. I've gone for some needles with a large eye, which are going to be easier to thread, and a sharp point. So I cut a length of embroidery thread, and then for this project I split the silk into 3. So what I mean is I split it in half, and each half has got 3 strands. So I'm inserting the needle from the back of the fabric to the front, to the knots at the back, and I'm creating stitches. These are, I don't know, 1/4 inch long with a little gap in between each. You can of course pull your thread through for each stitch, or if you're just going through one layer of denim, you should be able to run a few up together. This isn't a fast bag to make, as you can see it's going to be quite time consuming, but I love this, the hand stitch element. I find it relaxing, almost meditative to sit and stitch for an evening. And it's super easy to change your colours if you decide that actually you've changed your mind. So what happens when you get to the edge of your next denim piece? Let me show you. So this one I'm just going to run over the top just a little bit. Insert my needle. Oh, get that to lie flat. That's really important. So that stitch is joining the two pieces of denim together. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to make sure these joins are slightly different in height so I don't have a straight line parallel. I'm just going to have varying heights of stitches here. And then go again. I'm just going to turn my fabric around because it'll be easier for me. There, you can see that. So, coming back up, I've done my join. I'm going to make sure those little gaps between the stitches there are not next to each other, that the stitches sort of overlap. I want it to have a randomness about it. I don't want to have any lines running horizontally caused by my stitches being parallel. The beauty of this bag is that it is all uneven and it does vary. So you're just going to carry on running your stitches parallel to each other all the way across your piece. Next I'm going to show you how to do a circle, because really I need to circle this first so that my running stitches, let me widen out there for you so you can see what I mean. So if I'm going to do circular here and this spreads out, I want to have that first before I get to these so that they don't cross. I mean, alternatively you could deliberately have different stitchings crossings. I personally prefer it not. So let me finish this line and then I'll show you how to stitch a circular here. Start at the centre, pull my thread through from the back, and you're going to do very small stitches. When I'm doing a circle I definitely go back and forth between my layers. So I'm being careful as well. At this point I think I've got lots of different layers of denim underneath. So my first round of stitches, it's only going to be 4, 5. If I'm not getting my So I'm doing these really close together. So I've got 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. I'm about to come round, so that's number 4. So rather than meet up, I'm just going a little bit wider and then a little bit. So I'm just gradually working my way around. Again, trying to make sure the edges of my stitches aren't right next to each other as we did with the running. And this is running stitch, but just in a roughly circular. As you can see, I'm just doing it by eye. If you are more comfortable with templates, you could use a tailor's chalk and anything as a circle, as a template. You could use the end of a cotton reel and you could draw yourself a circle. Personally, I don't get too hung up about it. To be honest, no one's going to come up to my bag and say, oh, that's not a perfect circle. What were you doing there? You see, I'm just tweaking the tension here. And I want to make sure my fabric lies flat and I haven't accidentally pulled it up. Oh, I've got a knot there, let me undo that. So hopefully you can see there that I've gradually stitched round and round, making my circle ever bigger. More like a spiral really. Now my thread's coming to an end, so I'm just going to show you how I finish off my ends on the back. So take my needle through. You can see all my circular stitches there, a bit more clearer. And I just do 2 or 3 stitches on top of itself, but I'm only going through the denim, not through the cotton on the other side. So where I did my grey stitches along here, I brought my thread across till I had 2 layers of fabric on the correct side, and I just finished off on the denim. So I will pull my threads across just to make sure that I'm not showing through when I do my 2 or 3 stitches on top of each other. And then I roughly know where to take my needle through to pick up again on the right side. Let's see, nearly perfect. There we go. So I'm just going to keep going. So you can see that here I've reached the edge of my fabric, my cotton scrap, and I'm just going to keep going round. I've pinned these pieces here because it's where I've got several layers of fabric, and I want to make sure they continue to lie flat as I stitch. Tease that out a bit, that's a bit tight there, that's better. So I'm constantly keeping an eye on my tension, and it does help if you just occasionally, and often I'm doing this on my knee, but it does help if you can lay it against a flat surface and just check that your tension is okay. I'm going to remove that pin now. So I'm just going to keep working around. Now at this point, I'm not sure that I'm going to completely cover the rectangle in stitching. You do this by eye and you work out what's pleasing to you as you stitch. There isn't a precise plan for this bag. It is intuitive. It takes lots of time, but that really doesn't matter. I'm quite happy to spend my evening hand stitching with music or the radio or television. I find it relaxing to have something to do with my hands. Never mind the pleasure it brings of creating fabric scraps into something unique and beautiful. So I want to make sure this bit lies flat around here. Yes, that feels good. I don't feel like I've got any issues. So as I go around onto the denim, my stitches are going to contrast and show up a lot more. but each individual stitch really won't show in the overall bag finish. So please be reassured, don't worry about getting each stitch the same length with the same gap in between. It really doesn't matter. I can't emphasise that enough. So I'm going to keep going round. I think I'm going to go to about here and then stop, and if I haven't quite got those bits, then I include them in the stitching from here and from this piece. I'll show you what it looks like when I've finished. As you sew your denim together, you may reach a point where you think, oh, I'd like a bit of guidance with my stitching. You can use a tailor's ruler and some tailor's chalk. I've got this piece here, so I've stitched, that will be vertically when it's the right side up here and horizontally there. I'm going to stitch horizontally here, and because it's the centre of the bag, I'm just a bit more keen about getting this straight. So I'm going to just use a bit of tailor's chalk and my quilter's ruler so I can see where I'm drawing, and I'm going to use that line as a guideline for stitching along. Once I stitch down here, I'm going to work sideways until I filled the piece in. So my side of my bag is virtually finished, but I want to just stop and show you how to continue stitching from a straight shape where you've got straight stitches running along. So I've stitched my shape on first from my stitches over the edge. Now I'm simply going to carry those lines on, and I'm just going to follow the grain in the jeans to the edge. I'm going to cast off. I'm just going to do 2 or 3 stitches on top of each other. And repeat. So pick up from that red stitch there and continue running along. To be honest, probably nobody's going to look at your bag that closely, but personally this just gives it a more of a professional finish. Now I've picked a thread which is very similar in colour to the denim. I thought it would stand out a little bit more. This is a dark grey thread on a navy background. So I hope you can see that there. So I'm just continuing the line. When I finish these stitches here, I'll do the opposite end up here, and then I'll run stitches all the way along the panel parallel to the piece and joining up here. So here are my finished denim pieces. I love them. It's really my kind of style of work. So this is going to be the base, and we're going to box the corners when we make the bag, so we're going to lose some of this to the bottom of the bag. But first of all, we're going to apply Annie Soft and Stable to the back of the denim. This is the back. So cut out your Annie Soft and Stable as per the pattern pieces. Apply some craft spray adhesive to it in an outside well ventilated area, and then apply to the back of your denim. And I try and use my stitch lines as a guide in terms of getting it parallel to my vertical lines. So now we've applied Annie Soft and Stable, we are going to line up our pieces along the Annie Soft and Stable line. So I'm just doing that by feel. Where does the Annie Soft and Stable start on the piece beneath me? Yeah. So I'm going to pin this in place. There's a lot of layers to go through. So depending on what type of sewing machine you've got, it may depend upon how you do this next. I know if I got my old Benina out, it would just happily chuck through this, but my modern Janome wouldn't be quite so happy. So we're going to sew down from the top, down the side, along the bottom and back up, back stitching at the top of each side seam. On a regular sewing machine, I would recommend a walking foot, a denim needle and denim thread. On a sewing machine that will cope with more layers, you may well not need the walking foot, and your regular sewing machine foot may be perfectly fine for your sewing machine to cope. But it is quite thick. But the Annie Soft and Stable, although expensive and thick, is really going to add form to this bag, and it's worth it. So we stitched our seams and I've trimmed the seam allowance. So the next thing we're going to do is box the corners. So I'm going to fold and pinch my side seam to my bottom seam, and I'm going to align them hopefully fairly accurately. So can you see how that gives form? It's going to create the base of your bag. So the next thing I'm going to do is measure out the width of the bag. So on the blog post for this bag, I made it 7 inches wide. I don't want a 7-inch wide bag this time. I'm going to go for 4 inches. So to measure out the width of your bag, I'm going to use a quilter's ruler because I find them really helpful to get a right angle to the seam and to ensure I'm measuring equidistance to that seam either side. So I've drawn a stitch line and that's 2 inches either side. I'm going to do the same for this side. So I'm going to machine stitch that across, which will create my boxed corner and the width to my bag. Once you've stitched your corners, trim your seam allowance both sides. Then we're going to set this bag aside and we're going to focus on the lining. So the lining I've already pre-cut out and ironed iron-on fusible fleece, not fusible fleece, iron-on interfacing to the back of. I'm going to make some pockets. So I love slip pockets. I find them really useful. So this is 13 by 6.5 inches fabric. One piece which I folded in half. This is slightly different to the written tutorial because I've been making bags a while now and I prefer them to be double strength fabric. I've got 2. I'm going to stitch down one side and the next on both. So once you've stitched around your pocket, you're going to turn it out. And press the corners out. I did trim the corners actually before I turned it. And you're going to press it and press in your raw edges like I've done here. So my raw edge is pressed in. So we're going to place the pocket down onto our lining. Now we've got to allow enough space at the top for a magnetic snap and our seam allowance. So I'm going to leave a reasonable distance there. I don't know what's on the written instructions, but that's 4 inches. And I'm going to make sure it is central, which it is by eye. Brilliant. So the pressed in raw edges are placed facing the bottom of the bag. So we're going to machine stitch around the 3 sides, back stitching at the top of each side there, because that's going to be a pressure point for the pocket. As we stitch along the bottom, we're enclosing that raw edge. So we just pin that in place. Of course, you've got options here. You could add zipper pockets if you prefer, or you could do a row of slip pockets at the bottom of the bag like you might get in a changing bag. It's up to you. This is my personal preference. I'm going to be using the bag myself. I love 2 slip pockets, and I'm going to put my keys in one, my mobile in the other, and then the rest of whatever I'm carrying in the main body of the bag. So now we've got our pockets on, I'm going to install our magnetic snaps. I've folded my lining fabric in half and put a crease in just to give me the middle, and I'm going to iron on a piece of fusible fleece. It's about 2 inches square, and I'm putting it ½ an inch down from the top of my fusible interfacing, and that's just going to provide strength for my magnetic snap. I'm going to do the same on both sides of the lining. So I've got my 2 pieces of lining fabric here with my fusible fleece attached. Here's my pieces for the magnetic snap, and I've got a pencil and a seam ripper. So I'm going to measure the central position, and I'm going to place my magnetic snap washer over my central position and mark where I need to cut holes with the seam ripper. So the seam ripper is an ideal tool. Let's just check they're big enough. Yeah. Now, you don't need to do this, but if you have it, it's worth it. I've got some fray stop glue, so I'm going to apply that on the right side to stop the cotton fraying. And I'm going to do the same for the other side. So I've inserted one side of the magnetic snap. So this is my other side that's been marked and fray stop glued. Press the prongs through to the other side. There you go. Place your washer on, press out. Now, just to add additional strength to this, I'm going to apply a piece of fusible interfacing over the top. It's not necessary, but if you've got scraps of fusible interfacing, it's well worth it just to give it that little bit of added strength. So now you've inserted your magnetic snap, I've placed both sides of the interfacing, right sides facing together, and shut at the snap there. I've pinned the sides. We are going to stitch according to the seam allowance down the sides and in 3 inches at the bottom here, and then we're going to stop because this is going to be our turning gap in the bag. Then start again 3 inches from the side and up the other side. So as you did for your main bag, we're going to box the corners. As you can see, I've aligned my seams. I've got my turning gap in the bottom of the bag. So I'm going to mark my 2 inches. Now, ideally you want your lining to be fractionally smaller than your outer bag, but I've only just thought about that, so that's not going to happen, but I am going to make sure my corner is fractionally shorter than 4 inches. As you can see, the bag's coming together now. So we've got the outer bag, which I've turned right sides out, inner bag. So we're going to place one inside the other. And we're going to align our side seams. Now, I never trimmed the top of my denim bag because of my stitching. That was deliberate. I didn't want to cut off all those loose ends of Sashiko thread. So I know I've got excess fabric at the top here. So I'm making sure my corners are pushed really closely together and that seam is aligned. So I'm going to go around and pin this in place. Then I'm going to very carefully stitch. See there, you can see the bag. I'm going to stitch round the top here in my seam allowance, all the way round. I'm going to put my walking foot back on the machine with my denim needle, my denim thread, and I'm going to stitch that very carefully. So I have stitched round and I've trimmed my seam allowance for the fusible, the anti-soft and sable at the top of the bag there, as close-ish as I can. Obviously in the corners it's not as easy because you've already stitched it for your side seams, but now I'm going to turn the bag out through the turning gap in the bottom of the lining. Check your corners are out nicely. So you've got two choices about finishing this turning gap here at the bottom of your bag. You can either hand stitch it together using a ladder stitch along the seam, or you can just top stitch it shut by folding in your edges. I'm just going to top stitch that shut. It's the bottom of my bag, no one's going to see it. So once you've done that, I'm just going to pretend I've done it for the minute. I've got the top of the bag to deal with. Now it's quite bulky, but we're going to turn the lining in all round, give it a press, pin and then top stitch along the top, because that's just going to give it a much more professional finish. You may not be able to get through the side seams, you may need to use a bulky seam aid and you still might not be able to get through it. If you've not seen a bulky seam aid before, check out my how to sew denim video. Yeah, so give that a press and then with a long stitch, your walking foot, your denim machine needle, top stitch along the bag. And then we've only got handles to go. So now you're top stitched around the top of your bag, we're going to add some leather straps. I've cut two straps that are 31 inches by 1 inch, and I'm going to place them onto the bag with double cap rivets, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So you want a double cap rivet that is going to cope with the thickness of your bag and the leather. Ooh. Let me just try and show you that. So can you see how it's a little bit wider, but I'm going to put, obviously there's got to be room for the other side to go on, and the leather. Unfortunately I'm not quite sure what size this is. It's probably an 8 or a 9mm cap rivet. So we're going to place them in, measuring from the side seams, and make sure that they're equal distance from the side. So I'm just going to do that by eye, to be honest, initially. Measure that for you so you've got a rough idea. So that's 2.5 inches in from the side. I think I'm going to go 3. Right, let's go 3. And from the top of the bag, 1.5. Right, I'm just going to clever clip that in place. So obviously the other one needs to be in the same position. So you're going to need hole punch, hammer, obviously your double cap rivets, and also this tool that I can never remember the name of to bang the two sides together. Let me zoom in. So the first thing we're going to do is punch 2 holes through the leather. Now, and the bag, you may not get through it in one go. Let's see. So I'm going centrally. Yeah, that felt like it went through. Yep. So place your cap rivet through. There we go, through now. So place either end of the double cap rivet on. Now you need your tool that's name I can't remember. And you're going to give it a good old whack. And that just connects the 2 sides of the cap rivet together. Right, so let's put the second one in. There you go, that's one side of your leather strap attached to your bag. So I'm going to repeat that for the other side. So check your measurements. So I was in 2.5 from the edge. And 1.5 from the top. Right, I'll just bang those together. And then repeat for the second side of the bag. So here's my finished bag. With my leather handles. The leather's a little crumpled at the moment, but that'll soon uncrumple as I use the bag. I love it. I'm not sure which side I prefer, but it's certainly one unique fabric scrap, Sashiko inspired bag. There you can see the lining inside with my 2 slip pockets. Enjoy making yours. I have to say, the process is so meditative and relaxing. I made one about 4 years ago, and it lasted really well. I used it all the time. However, I decided it was time to treat myself to a new one.